There is a specific kind of quiet to a wedding when half the chairs sit empty. I am Waverly Ashford, 33, a labor and delivery nurse who has caught more babies than I can count. I stood at the end of that aisle in June and looked at my side of the lawn. 40 white chairs. Not one of my own people in them. My mom had laughed when I begged her to come. My brother had a soccer game that afternoon. The empty chairs weren't the cruel part. What turned up 2 weeks later, sealed and hidden in my mother's car, was. And what my father did when he finally saw the proof, tore this family clean in half. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people find their spine and quiet women stop apologizing for taking up space. If a family that chose someone else over you ever made you doubt your worth, you are among friends here. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and be sure to subscribe. People who meet me at work call me the calm one. In a delivery room, when a monitor drops and the room tightens, I am the nurse who keeps her voice level and her hands steady. I chart everything. Times, doses, who said what? My husband Daniel jokes that I keep receipts for my own grocery list. He is not wrong. I learned young that being the steady one was a job, and I took the job. When my mother needed someone to drive my grandmother to dialysis, she called me. When a pipe burst at my parents' house at midnight, she called me. Not my brother Cole. Me. I told myself that was love wearing work clothes. That spring, Daniel proposed on the back porch with a ring his mother had kept in a coffee can for 20 years. I said yes before he finished the question. We set a date for June, a barn out past the orchards, gold light and folding chairs. I wanted it simple, and I wanted it full. I wanted my mom in the front row, dabbing her eyes like other mothers did. I told myself this time would be different. I had spent 33 years explaining her to other people. Surely she could give me one Saturday. I bought the dress. I built the seating chart twice. I left the whole front row open on my side, 4 chairs, because I still believed they would fill. That belief is the thing I want you to remember. Not because I was naive, because I had been trained, one disappointment at a time, to keep hoping anyway. I did not know yet that hoping was exactly what someone in my family planned to use against me. I drove the 20 minutes to my parents' house on a Tuesday to hand my mother the invitation in person. I thought the gesture mattered. Maureen Ashford answered the door in her gardening gloves and looked at the cream envelope like it was a coupon she had not asked for. I told her the date. June 14th. I told her it was the most important day of my life. I actually said the words, "Please do not miss this. It is a once-in-a-lifetime thing for me." My father, Walt, sat in his recliner behind her with the game on low and gave me a small nod he probably thought was support. My mother took off one glove, slow, and smiled the smile she saves for telling you no. "Oh, honey," she said. "That's Cole's tournament weekend, the alumni championship." I said the wedding had been booked for 8 months. She shrugged like the calendar was my fault. "Cole's game is more important. You'll understand when you have real responsibilities." There it was. The sentence I would hear in my sleep for the rest of that summer. She said it the way you'd mention the weather. Then she brightened, suddenly helpful, and reached for the box of invitations under my arm. "Let me mail those out for the family," she said. "Save you the postage. You've got enough on your plate." I almost cried with relief, if you can believe that. I handed her 40 sealed invitations addressed to aunts and cousins and my grandmother. I thanked her. I drove home feeling like a daughter who had finally been given a small kindness. I want to be honest with you about that moment, because it is the hinge the whole story swings on. I gave her the envelopes myself. I put the knife in her hand and thanked her for holding it. I would not understand that for 2 more weeks. You should know this was not new. It had a 30-year track record. When I made the regional spelling bee in 5th grade, my mother left at the lunch break because Cole had a pee-wee scrimmage across town. I placed second to an empty seat. At my nursing pinning, the photos show my mom checking her phone while a stranger's mother cried for me. Cole was 19 then, and he had a club match. There was always a match. My brother is gifted. I will give him that. He had a wall of trophies and a knee that gave out at 20, and a mother who decided, somewhere along the way, that his light was the family's only light. I spent my childhood holding the flashlight. I told myself 100 kind stories about why. She was tired. She was stretched thin. She loved us the same, just differently. I was good at those stories. I had to be, because the alternative felt too cold to hold. Even that Tuesday, driving home, I built her another one. She is just bad at calendars. She means well. Here is the part I did not let myself see. Every time I excused her, I taught her the price of hurting me was 0. I kept the ledger balanced out of my own pocket. There was a feeling I had carried since I was 22, a quiet certainty that I was somehow not quite good enough, that the good things landed on Cole because he deserved them and skipped me because I did not. I had built a whole adult life around managing that feeling. I did not know yet that not good enough had not been a fact about me. It had been a decision someone made, on my behalf, a long time ago, and hid in a drawer. Daniel's family confused me, in the best way. The first time his mother, Patricia, met me, she hugged me like I was already hers, and asked about my 12-hour shifts like the answers mattered. The Mercers were loud at dinner. They interrupted each other. They saved the last roll for whoever looked hungriest. When Daniel told them we were engaged, his father stood up and toasted me before he toasted his own son. I did not know what to do with my hands. I had spent my life in a family where affection was rationed, and here it came in helpings nobody counted. 2 weeks before the wedding, Patricia called to ask my mother's favorite flower because she wanted the mother's corsages to match. I had to make one up. I said gardenias, and hoped my mom would not notice she had a corsage at all. That was the kind of arranging I did automatically, smoothing the gap between the family I had and the family that was about to fill the other half of the barn. I still kept 4 chairs open on my side. Daniel asked me once if I wanted to move them, fold them up, spare myself the visual. I said no. I said my parents might surprise us. He kissed my forehead and let me keep my hope, even though I think he already knew. He had watched my mother forget my birthday in March and call 3 days later annoyed that I sounded distant. He had seen the pattern with clearer eyes than mine, but he loved me enough not to say the thing out loud. Some kindnesses look like silence. I held on to those 4 empty chairs like a woman holding a door for guests who had already decided not to come. The first wrong note came from my cousin Maddie. She texted me 10 days out, friendly and confused. "Hey, so sorry the date got pushed. Did you land on a new weekend yet?" I read it 3 times. Pushed. Nothing had been pushed. I called her. Maddie said her mom, my Aunt Brenda, had told the whole cousin group that I had postponed the wedding, maybe to fall, that I wanted to keep things small and quiet and would reach out when I was ready. My stomach did a slow, cold turn. I told Maddie the wedding was on June 14th, 2 in the afternoon, the Hartwell barn, and please come. Then I called my mother, because some reflex still sent me to her first. I asked if the invitations had gone out. There was a pause that I would replay later. Then her voice, warm as a quilt. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I mailed them myself. Weeks ago." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother and she had offered to help, and helping mothers mail invitations. I told her some of the cousins seemed confused about the date. She sighed, patient with my worrying. "You know how Brenda gets things mixed up? I'll straighten it out." I thanked her again. I keep counting the number of times I thanked my mother in those weeks, each thank you a small deposit into an account she was quietly emptying. I told myself the confusion was a misunderstanding between 2 older sisters who never could keep a story straight. That was the kind explanation. I reached for it because the unkind one was unthinkable. Why would a mother take her daughter's wedding invitations, promise to mail them, and instead drive them around in her trunk like a load she meant to take to the dump? People don't do that. I was sure people don't do that. I did not just sit with the bad feeling. I am not built that way. The next morning, I pulled my own guest list and started calling the relatives myself, one by one, the way I work a unit when something feels off. Aunt Carol, 2 cousins, my mother's old neighbor who had known me since I wore braces. Half of them said the same strange thing. They had heard I wanted it private. They had been told, gently, by Brenda or by my mother, that Waverly was overwhelmed and please don't crowd her. She'll invite who she wants when she's ready. I told each of them the truth. I am not overwhelmed. I want you there. The address is the same. Please come. Some said they would. Some had already made other plans. A trip. A christening. The slot given away weeks ago when they were told they were not needed. I did everything a person can do with a phone, and 10 days. I corrected the record. I re-invited. I texted the barn address to a group of 40. What I could not do was unring a bell that had been rung quietly for a month while I was busy fitting a dress. The lie had a head start I could not close in time, and it had been told by the two people no one in that family would think to doubt. If you have ever called a relative back just to confirm you were still invited to your own life, you already know this exact feeling. Stay with me. It gets worse before it gets right. And it does get right. Comment, I see her if Waverly already sounds like someone you know. I made my calls. I told the truth. And I went to bed believing truth would be enough. The night before the wedding, I texted my mother one last time. I kept it simple. The barn at 2. There's a seat in the front row with your name on it. I love you. I hit send and set the phone on the nightstand and tried to sleep in the little rented cabin with Daniel snoring soft beside me. At 11:40, the phone lit. A voicemail, not a text. My mother rarely left voicemails. I stepped onto the cold porch in bare feet and pressed play, and her voice came through low and clipped, the public quilt stripped off it. I listened to the whole thing once. Then I sat down on the step because my legs had stopped offering opinions. I did not cry, and I did not call back. I did one thing, the thing I always do. I pressed save. I labeled it with the date the way I label a chart. Then I sat in the dark a while longer and let the cold come up through the wood and into me, and I made a decision about the next day that had nothing to do with her. I will not tell you yet what she said on that recording. I could not have repeated it that night without my voice breaking, and you do not need it yet either. You need to know only this. I saved it. I am the woman who saves things. My whole life that habit had looked like anxiety, like a person who cannot relax, who keeps receipts for the grocery list. That night it became something else. It became the quiet click of a door that my mother did not hear closing, in a recording she did not know would outlive her version of the truth. The morning of the wedding came clear and warm, the kind of June day you would order if they let you. I checked my phone once while the stylist pinned my hair. Nothing from my mother. Nothing from my father. Nothing from Cole. There was, however, a post from my brother, a story from the tournament fields 2 counties over, his cleats in the grass and the caption, "Big day, let's go." Big day. I set the phone face down. I looked at myself in the mirror, a 33-year-old woman in her grandmother's pearls, and I had a conversation with my own reflection that I want to share with you, because it was the turn. I had 2 choices that morning. I could spend my wedding grieving the people in the empty chairs, or I could marry the man waiting in the barn and let my actual life begin. I chose the barn. I decided, standing there, that my family would not get to ruin a day they had not even bothered to attend. That decision did not erase the hurt. The hurt sat in my chest the whole afternoon, a low ache under the joy, the way a healing bruise sits under a sleeve. But I would not hand them the day on top of everything else they had taken. I picked up my flowers. I found my father's absence where his arm should have been and decided to walk myself down. And then Daniel's father knocked on the door of the bridal cabin in his good gray suit and asked if I would do him the honor of letting him walk me instead. I said yes before he finished the question. Again. Here is the thing about an empty half of a barn. Everyone sees it. The guests file in and they glance at the bride's side and they do the math without meaning to. I watched it happen from the side door, that little ripple of pity moving through Daniel's relatives as they realized no one was sitting for me. And then his mother, Patricia, did something I will carry to my grave. She stood up in the front row of the groom's side, in her gardenia corsage, and she turned to her whole loud family, and she said, loud enough to carry, "We're both sides today, move on over." And they did. Aunts and uncles and cousins I had known for 2 years stood up and crossed the aisle and filled my empty chairs. They filled all 40. A man I had met twice sat in the seat I had saved for my father and gave me a thumbs up like he had been assigned the post. By the time the music started, there was not an empty chair on either side, and the only people who could tell which side was which were the two of us at the front. I walked down the aisle on Daniel's father's arm past 40 faces that had decided, without a meeting, to be my family for an hour. I cried then, finally, but not for the people who skipped it. I cried because I had spent my life believing love had to be earned in a currency I could never quite mint, and here was a barn full of people spending it on me for free. Daniel took my hands, and his were shaking more than mine. We said the words. We meant them. Somewhere 2 counties away, a whistle blew, and a crowd cheered for my brother. I did not hear it. I was busy getting married. Our photographer was a young woman named Sasha, who worked weddings on weekends and posted the best moments to build her business. At the reception, she asked if she could share a few shots and a short video. I said sure, distracted, dancing with my new father-in-law to a song my own father never learned the words to. The clip she made was 30 seconds long. It opened on the empty bride's side, those 40 white chairs sitting alone in the gold light. And then it cut to Patricia standing and turning and saying, "We're both sides today." And then to the rush of strangers crossing the aisle to fill the seats. And it ended on my face as I came down on Daniel's father's arm. She set it to something soft. She captioned it simply, "When her family didn't show, his became hers." I did not think much of it that night. I had cake on my dress and a husband on my arm and a hotel key in my clutch. I had no idea that one 30-second video would do the thing I had never been able to do in 33 years of careful kindness. It would tell the truth out loud, to everyone, all at once, in a way no amount of my private calling and correcting ever could. By the time Daniel and I came back from 3 days at a lake cabin with no signal, that clip had been watched 40,000 times. And the comments. The comments were where my mother's whole careful house began, very quietly, to catch fire. I did not light the match. I want that on the record. I just got married, and a stranger with a camera told the truth, and the truth turned out to be flammable. The comments did what comments do. They asked questions out loud that families usually only whisper. Under Sasha's clip, strangers wept and cheered, but mixed in with them were names I recognized. My Aunt Carol wrote, "I had no idea this was even happening. I would have driven all night." A cousin wrote, "Wait, this was the wedding? We were told it got postponed." Another aunt, Maureen, said Waverly wanted it private. This breaks my heart. Each comment was a small public correction, and they stacked up under the video where anyone could scroll them, including the very people who had spread the lie. My phone, when I turned it back on at the lake, had 91 notifications and a voicemail box full of relatives who suddenly understood they had been managed. The story my mother and aunt had told, the one where I was the overwhelmed bride who wanted to be left alone, could survive in private. It could not survive 40,000 witnesses and a comment section comparing notes. Daniel read over my shoulder as the truth assembled itself in public, one timestamp at a time. He said quietly, "Babe, they're figuring it out." I sat on the edge of the cabin bed in my lake clothes and watched my extended family discover, in real time and in writing, that they had not been kept away by my wishes. They had been kept away by a story someone told them about my wishes. There is a particular vertigo in that. For a month I had felt crazy, like I was the only one who could see a thing no one else would name. Now the whole comment section could see it. I was not crazy. I had been right. And being right, it turned out, was about to cost my mother everything she had spent 40 years protecting. Patricia called the morning the signal came back, before we had even packed the car. I expected congratulations. Instead, I got a mother bear on the phone, her voice tight with a kind of anger I had never had aimed in my defense before. She had read every comment. She had done the math the way the wedding guests had done the math. "Sweetheart," she said, "your people were told you postponed. That's not a mix-up. Somebody lied to keep them home." I said maybe it was a misunderstanding. I heard the old reflex in my own voice, reaching for the kind explanation, and I heard Patricia refuse it for me. "No," she said, "I raised 3 kids. You don't misunderstand 40 invitations." She was so sure on my behalf that it knocked something loose in me. My whole life I had been the only one defending me, and I had done it badly, by excusing the people who hurt me. Here was a woman who had known me 2 years, furious in a way I had never let myself be. It gave me permission. I want to stop here and say something to you directly. The strangers who married into my life defended me faster than the people who raised me. If you have ever had a chosen family love you louder than your blood, you know what a strange and healing thing that is. Tell me below if someone outside your bloodline ever stood up for you when your own people sat down. And subscribe, because what my husband's mother said next is the reason I finally stopped making excuses. Patricia said, "Find out what actually happened, Waverly. Not for revenge, so you can stop carrying a guilt that was never yours." I hung up and I knew she was right. It was time to stop guessing. It was time to know. The proof came to me, but I want to be careful about how I say that, because I did not sit and wait for it. I had spent a week making calls and asking questions, and that week is why Maddie thought to do what she did. My cousin had borrowed my mother's car to move a dresser, because her own truck was in the shop. She was clearing the trunk to fit the dresser when she found a department store bag, heavy, shoved under the spare tire well. Inside were 40 cream envelopes, my handwriting on the front of each one. Aunt Carol, Uncle Pete, Nana Ruth, the cousins. Every name I had addressed at my kitchen table in April. Sealed, stamped, even. Never mailed. Maddie drove them straight to my house and set the bag on my counter without a word, and we both stood there looking at it like it was something pulled out of a river. 40 of them, still sealed. My own wedding invitations, riding around in my mother's trunk like trash she forgot to dump. I picked one up. The stamp was on it. She had even put the stamps on, which meant she had thought about mailing them, had gotten that far, and then had chosen, deliberately, not to. That detail is the one that ended the kind explanations forever. A woman who forgets does not stamp 40 envelopes and hide them under a spare tire. A woman who forgets does not look her daughter in the eye and say, "I mailed them myself, weeks ago." I set the envelope down very gently, the way you set down a newborn, and I felt something in my chest go from hot to cold and stay cold. This was no longer a feeling I had to defend to people who told me I was too sensitive. This was 40 pieces of paper. This was evidence. And I am, as I told you, a woman who knows exactly what to do with evidence. I did with my family what I do with a complicated patient. I built a chart. I sat at my kitchen table with the bag of envelopes and my phone and a legal pad, and I worked it like a case. Down one column, every relative who had been confused. Across the top, what they were told, who told them, and when. I called each one back. Not emotional now, just methodical, the nurse voice on. Aunt Carol forwarded me the text my mother had sent in early May. "Waverly's decided to postpone. Bless her heart. She's overwhelmed. Let's give her space and not bring it up." Time stamped 3 weeks before the wedding I was actively planning. A cousin forwarded a message from Brenda. "Don't RSVP, hon. It's on hold. Maureen will let us know." I lined the screenshots up next to the sealed envelopes and the picture got very clear and very ugly. This was not one bad moment. This was a campaign. It had a sender, a relay, and a timeline, and every piece of it was now sitting on my kitchen table in my own handwriting and theirs. I did not feel triumphant. I felt strangely calm, the way I feel when a chaotic delivery finally organizes itself into something I can manage. For 33 years, my mother's version of me had floated free, unanswerable, because she only ever told it to one person at a time, where it could not be checked. Now I had it in writing, in stamps, in timestamps. I made copies. Of course I made copies. I put the originals in a folder and the folder in a drawer, and then I sat back and asked myself the only question left. Not whether she did it. I knew that now. The question was why a mother would do this to a daughter, and that answer was older than the wedding. 2 things came clear that week, and they pointed in different directions. The first was Brenda. My aunt had been the relay, the one who carried my mother's story out to the cousins so it would not all trace back to one voice. When I called Brenda directly, she got defensive fast, then weepy, then defensive again. "I only repeated what your mother told me," she said. "She's my big sister. Why would she lie about her own daughter's wedding?" There it was. the whole engine of it. Nobody questioned Maureen, because questioning Maureen was unthinkable, and she knew it, and she used it. Brenda had spent her life half a step behind her older sister, in her debt for some loan or favor decades old, and she paid that debt in loyalty she never thought to examine. The second thing pointed the other way, toward my father. When I gently asked relatives what Walt had said, they all reported the same thing. He had told people, sincerely, that I had wanted my parents to come to Cole's championship, that I had said I understood, that I had given my blessing for them to miss the wedding. My father was not covering for my mother. He believed it. He had been told a version where his daughter had released him from her own wedding, and he had been sad about it, but had taken her at her word. Except I never said any of that. I never released anyone. My mother had not only lied to the relatives, she had lied to her own husband, told him a daughter's permission that the daughter never gave, so that he would sit in a stadium with a clear conscience while I walked down the aisle alone. My father was not a villain in this. My father was just another person my mother had managed, and he did not know it yet. I drove to my parents' house on a Thursday, when I knew my mother would be at her garden club. My father answered the door surprised, a little wary, the way you are around someone you think is angry at you. I told him I was not angry at him. I told him I needed him to see something, and I needed him to look at it without my mother in the room narrating it. We sat at the kitchen table where I had eaten 10,000 breakfasts. I laid out the sealed envelopes first. 40 of them. His mother's name, his sister-in-law's name. All in my handwriting. All stamped. None mailed. Then I laid out the screenshots. Maureen telling Carol I had postponed. Brenda telling the cousins to stay home. The timeline. 3 weeks before a wedding everyone but my own family had known was happening. My father is not a fast man with words. He read each screenshot slowly, his reading glasses low on his nose, and I watched his face go from confusion to a terrible stillness. He picked up one of the sealed envelopes and turned it over and saw the stamp, and I think the stamp got him the way it got me. He set it down. He took his glasses off. When he finally spoke, his voice did not rise, which was worse than if it had. "She told me you wanted us at Cole's game," he said. "She told me you said you understood." I said I never said that. I said I begged her to come. He sat with that a long moment. Then my father, who has avoided a hard word with my mother for 40 years, said the sentence that ended the marriage. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." He looked at the envelopes. "But if your mother did this on purpose, if she planned it, then she and I are done." My father needed a minute, so he went looking for something to do with his hands, and that is how we found the rest of it. He wanted to know if there was more, if this was the first time, or just the first time we had caught her. He said if she had hidden one thing from him, she had likely hidden others, and he knew exactly where she kept what she did not want seen. He went to the hall closet and pulled down my mother's keepsake box, the one on the high shelf where she filed every private paper, the one we were never to touch. He had every right. It was his house, too. Inside, under the baby books and the church bulletins, was a manila envelope addressed to me, opened, 11 years old. It was from the Regional Medical Center's nursing scholarship program, dated the spring I was 22. It was an acceptance. A full ride to their accelerated nursing program, the competitive one, the one I had told myself I was not smart enough to get into because I never heard back. I had not failed to get in. I had gotten in, and the letter had come to this house while I lived in this house, and someone had opened it and read it and put it in a box on a high shelf and let me believe I had been rejected. I had to sit down on the floor of the hallway. I became a nurse anyway. I did it the long way, 2 extra years, working as an aide and taking classes at night, $12,000 of debt I was still paying. All because the easy door had been opened for me and then quietly shut by a woman who needed me to stay home and stay small and keep holding the flashlight for my brother. My father stood over me holding the letter, and for the first time in my life I watched him cry, not for himself. For the 11 years I had spent believing I was less. My mother, sensing the ground shift, did what cornered people do. She went on offense, and she dressed it as grief. Within days the phone tree was humming with a new story, her best one yet. Now I was the cruel daughter who had abandoned her aging mother, who was poisoning the father against the marriage, who had always been jealous of Cole, and was finally showing my true colors. She cried to her garden club. She cried to the pastor. She told people I had gone online to humiliate the family, as if I had made Sasha's video, as if 40,000 strangers were a weapon I had aimed instead of a mirror she could not stand to look into. The genius of it, and I can call it genius now without flinching, was that it used the same machine that had always worked. Tell the story first. Tell it to one person at a time. Make yourself the wounded one. For 40 years, that machine had run clean, but the machine depended on no one comparing notes, and the comparing had already started in a comment section she could not delete. Relatives who got her tearful calls now had Maddie in the group chat saying gently, "I found the invitations in her trunk. They were stamped. I have photos." My mother was still telling the room she had been wronged while, behind her, the room was passing around the evidence she had been lying. She did not know the ground had already moved. She was performing a victimhood for an audience that was quietly turning around to look at the woman she had spent decades trying to keep small. I almost felt the pull to rescue her from herself. Old habit. I did not. I let her keep talking. The more she talked, the more she dug. The family did not turn all at once. It turned the way weather turns, a few degrees, then a front. Aunt Carol called my mother and asked her, point blank, about the postponement text, and my mother could not explain why she had sent it. A cousin asked about the stamps. There is no graceful answer to a stamp. One by one, the relatives who had spent decades giving my mother the benefit of the doubt ran out of doubt to give her. But the one that mattered most said nothing at all, for a while, and that silence was the loudest thing in the family. My grandmother, Nana Ruth, 81 years old, my mother's own mother, had been on the guest list. Her invitation had been in that trunk too. When Maddie showed her the photo of the sealed envelope with her name on it, Nana Ruth did not cry and did not rage. She just looked at it for a long time. Then she said one sentence to Maddie that traveled through the whole family within the hour. "I have buried a husband and 2 friends this year, and I would have crawled to that barn." Nana Ruth is the only person on earth my mother has ever feared. Maureen spent her whole life performing for her mother, being the good daughter, the capable one, the one who had it together. And now Nana Ruth knew. Not a rumor, not a version, a stamped envelope with her own name on it, found in her daughter's trunk. The matriarch had seen the truth, and everyone knew she had seen it. And that changed the math of the entire family. My mother had built her authority on being the one Nana Ruth trusted. That foundation had just cracked straight down the middle. Cole called me, finally, and he came in hot. My brother is not a cruel man, just a comfortable one, raised in a warm spot and never asked to feel the cold the rest of us stood in. He told me I was breaking up the family. He told me I was making Mom miserable over a scheduling thing. He said, "It was one weekend, Wave. You're really going to torch everything over one weekend?" I let him run out of steam. Then I asked him a simple question. I asked him when he thought my wedding had been. There was a pause. He said, confused, "Mom said it was a courthouse thing. Small. Sometime in the fall. She said you didn't want a big deal." I told him the date. June 14th. The same Saturday as his alumni championship. A real wedding, a barn, a dress, 40 empty chairs. I heard my brother go quiet in a way I had never heard him go quiet. Because here is the thing I realized while he sat there breathing on the other end of the line. Cole had not chosen his game over my wedding. He had never been given the choice. My mother had told him there was no wedding to miss. She had managed him too, just in a kinder-sounding direction, so that her golden boy would never have to know he had skipped his sister's wedding for a trophy. She had stolen the day from me and stolen the truth from him, to protect the version of herself she liked best. Cole said, very low. She told me it was months away. He said it twice, like he was checking it for cracks. I did not comfort him. But I did not twist the knife either. He was not the architect. He was just another room in the house she built on lies. Everyone wanted to know what I was going to do, Daniel asked. Patricia asked. Some part of the family clearly hoped I would do something loud, a lawsuit, a takedown video, a screaming match on the front lawn they could watch through the curtains. I understood the appeal. I had 11 years of stolen schooling and a wedding aisle of empty chairs and a saved voicemail I still could not listen to twice. I had every reason to burn it all down. But I am not in the business of burning. I am in the business of truth. And I had learned, finally, the difference between the two. My mother's whole power had always come from one trick. She told her story in private, to one person at a time, where no one could check it against anyone else's. Every harm she ever did to me survived because it lived in separate rooms that never compared notes. So I would not fight her with her own weapon. I would not lie about her, or spin her, or whisper a counter story into separate ears. I would do the one thing her entire scheme could not survive. I would put everyone in the same room and let the truth be checked out loud in front of all of them, at once. Her birthday was in 3 weeks. Her 62nd, the big backyard party she threw for herself every year, the one where the whole family gathered and she sat at the head of the table and received her due. She was still planning it, still expecting her court to assemble. I decided to let it assemble, not to ruin her party, to return to 40 people in one room the truth she had spent a month and a lifetime taking from them privately. Lies need separate rooms. The truth only needs everyone in the same one. I started making calls. I planned it the way I plan everything, carefully and without drama. I did not need a scene. I needed the right people present and the truth organized so it could not be wriggled out of. I called the relatives who had been lied to and made sure they would be there, not by telling them my plan, just by saying I hoped to see them at Mom's party and that it mattered to me. I made sure my father would come, though he and my mother were barely speaking by then, and he was staying at his brother's. I asked Maddie to bring the photos she had taken of the envelopes in the trunk, just in case. I made a clean folder, the 40 sealed invitations, the screenshots, printed and dated. The scholarship letter, 11 years old, with its postmark. I was not going to wave them around like a prosecutor. I was going to set them down, quietly, where people could see, and let the objects do what objects do. They do not get flustered. They do not cry. They cannot be told they are too sensitive. And the voicemail I decided I would keep in my pocket and only use if she forced me to, if she stood in front of everyone and denied it to my face. I hoped she would not make me. I genuinely did. The night before the party, Daniel sat with me at the table while I squared the edges of the folder for the 3rd time, and he asked if I was sure. I told him I was not doing it to destroy her. I said it slow, so I would believe it. I'm doing it so I stop being a lie people tell each other. I want my own story back. That's all. He took my hand. He said, "Okay, let's go get it." I barely slept, and the not sleeping was familiar, the same wired stillness I get before a long shift I know will be hard. I lay in the dark and ran it through, not the words I would say, but the way I wanted to be when I said them. Calm. That was the whole plan. My mother's gift was making other people lose their composure so that she, by contrast, could look like the reasonable one in the room. I had watched her do it for 33 years. The trick only works if you take the bait. So I would not raise my voice. I would not cry. Not there. I would not call her names or list my wounds like a bill come due. I would set down 40 envelopes and a few sheets of paper and ask the room a quiet question, and then I would let my mother be the one who could not stay calm. The power of the thing depended entirely on me being exactly who she had always told everyone I was not. Steady, trustworthy. The kind of woman whose plain account you believe because she has never once given you a reason not to. Toward morning, I finally understood something that let me rest. I was not nervous about whether the family would believe me. The envelopes had already done that work. I was nervous about a smaller, older thing. For my whole life, walking into my mother's house had meant becoming smaller, quieter, more careful. Tomorrow, I would walk in at full size and not shrink for the first time in my life. That was the real test. Not whether I could expose her, whether I could stand in her kitchen and stay myself. I closed my eyes. Morning came. My mother's backyard looked the way it always looked for her birthday, which is to say, it looked like a woman trying very hard to be celebrated. String lights between the maples, a long table with her good cloth, a sheet cake from the bakery that does the church weddings, her name in blue icing. By the time Daniel and I arrived, the yard was full. 20-some relatives in lawn chairs, paper plates of potato salad, my mother at the center in a new blouse, holding court. She saw me come through the gate and her face did something complicated, surprise and calculation, and then a quick pivot to the wounded warmth she wears like perfume. "Waverly," she said, loud for the audience. "I didn't think you'd come after everything." She let the "after everything" hang there, an accusation disguised as forgiveness, inviting the whole yard to wonder what cruel thing I had done to my poor mother. A month ago, that sentence would have folded me in half. I would have rushed to reassure her, to smooth it, to prove in front of everyone that I was good. I felt the old pull, even then, that lifelong reflex to shrink and apologize. I let it pass through me like a contraction, breathed it out, and stayed standing at full height. I had a tote bag over my shoulder, a plain canvas one, and inside it was the folder and 40 sealed envelopes. I did not reach for it yet. I said evenly, "Happy birthday, Mom. I brought something for everyone to see." I watched her register that I was not playing my part. I was not flustered, not weepy, not rushing to defend myself. The script she had run for 33 years needed me to be emotional so she could be calm. I was calm. And I saw, just for a second, real fear cross my mother's face, because a calm daughter was the one thing she had no move for. I did not make a speech. Speeches are for people who need to convince a room. The room was about to convince itself. I walked to the gift table, moved a wrapped box aside, and set my canvas bag down next to the cake. Then I reached in and took out the envelopes and laid them across the cloth in a slow fan, 40 of them, cream paper and blue stamps, names facing up so people could read them. Aunt Carol, Uncle Pete, Nana Ruth, the cousins. Every name in that yard, in my handwriting, sealed and stamped and never sent. The talking around the table thinned out and then stopped. I kept my voice low and level, the voice I use to tell a frightened mother that her baby is fine. "These are the invitations to my wedding," I said. "One for each of you." I addressed them in April. I gave them to my mother to mail, and she told me she did. I let that sit. Then I added the only instruction I would give. "You don't have to take my word for any of it. Check your own phones. Look at what you were told about that day, and who told you, and when." And that was the masterstroke of doing it her way in reverse, because they did. Right there, 20 relatives looked down at their own phones, scrolled their own texts, and read, in my mother's own words and Brenda's, the postponement that never happened. I did not have to accuse anyone. I just put everyone in the same room and let them compare the notes my mother had spent a lifetime keeping in separate drawers. Aunt Carol made a small sound and put her hand over her mouth. A cousin turned his phone toward the man beside him. Nana Ruth, in the good chair they always saved for her, picked up the envelope with her own name on it and held it in two hands and looked at her daughter across the yard. Nobody was looking at me anymore. Everybody was looking at Maureen. My mother did the only thing left to a person whose private stories have all been brought into the same room. She exploded. The warm, wounded perfume burned right off her, and what was underneath came out in a voice the neighbors could hear. "How dare you?" she said, and she was up out of her chair now, pointing at me across her own birthday cake. "You ungrateful, jealous girl. You have always been jealous of your brother. You could never just be happy for him." The relatives went still. This was not the Maureen they had been handed for 40 years, the patient martyr with the sad, soft voice. This was the other one, the one no one, only I, had ever seen, the one no one believed existed because she only ever came out when we were alone. "I gave my whole life to this family," she shouted, "and this is what I get, ambushed at my own party." Brenda stood up to help her, started to say something about a misunderstanding, and a cousin simply held up his phone and read Brenda's own text out loud, the one telling everyone not to RSVP. Brenda sat back down, and my mother, cornered, reached for the oldest weapon she had, the sentence she had used on me 100 times in private, and she used it now in front of everyone without understanding what it would cost her. I did what was best for this family, she said. Cole's game was more important. You'll understand when you finally have some real responsibilities of your own. There it was, said out loud in front of the whole yard, the exact sentence she had told me at her front door. I watched 20 faces hear it and understand, all at once, that it was true. She had said it. She meant it. I had not exaggerated a thing. I never raised my voice. I did not have to. She was doing all the raising for both of us, and every word made her smaller. Then she made her mistake. Maybe she saw the faces turning and panicked because she swung to outright denial, the thing I had hoped she would not force. I never said your wedding was canceled, she announced to the yard. I never told anyone that. She's twisting all of it. I would never say a cruel thing to my own daughter. She looked around for the nod she had always gotten. They did not come. And so I took my phone out of my pocket, the only time I touched it all afternoon, and I said quietly, "Mom, please don't make me do this." She lifted her chin. "Do what?" So I pressed play, and I turned the volume up, and my mother's own voice came out of my hand into the silent yard, the voicemail from the night before my wedding, 11:40 at night, the public quilt stripped off it. "Don't bother sending me that little reminder," her recorded voice said, cold and clear. "Don't expect any of us. I made sure of that. You want to play princess in a barn, you do it alone. This family has one star Waverly, and it was never you." The recording ended. Nobody breathed. It is one thing to read a text. It is another to hear your matriarch's true voice say 1 star and it was never you about her own daughter, at midnight, on purpose. Nana Ruth rose from her chair, slow, 81 years old, and she did not look at me. She looked at my mother and she said, "Maureen, what did you do?" Just that. My father stepped out of the back of the crowd where I had not even seen him standing, and he crossed the whole yard and he came and stood beside me, his shoulder against mine, a wall finally on my side. And Cole, my brother, the golden boy, went white as the tablecloth and said into the awful quiet, "Mom, you told me it was months away. You told me there was nothing to miss." It did not end in screaming. It ended in people quietly gathering their things. That is how these things really end. Not with a slap, but with a yard slowly emptying of everyone who came to celebrate a woman they no longer recognized. Nana Ruth asked Maddie to drive her home and did not say goodbye to her daughter. Aunt Carol hugged me on the way out and whispered that she was sorry. She should have driven over and knocked instead of believing a text, and I told her it was not her fault. The lie was built to be believed. My father did not go back into that house. He had already moved his things to my uncle's the week before, and standing in the yard that evening he told me, plainly, that he was filing. 40 years. And the stamps were what did it, he said, because a person can forgive a temper, but not a plan. Brenda left without a word and the cousins stopped returning her calls within the month. My mother stood alone by her own cake under the string lights, 62 years old in a new blouse, at a party that had walked out on her. I did not gloat. I want to tell you I felt triumph, but mostly I felt the strange flat quiet that comes after a hard delivery, when the danger has passed and you are just tired and clear. The scholarship letter, my father insisted, I should keep. I framed it, 11 years late, and hung it in the hallway of the house Daniel and I share, not as a wound, but as a record. I got into that program. Somebody hid it. I became a nurse anyway. All 3 of those things are true, and now they hang on a wall where I can see them and stop arguing with the first one. I did not cut my whole family off. That is the part people expect. The clean, dramatic exile. And it is not what I did. I just stopped being the person who held everyone else's lies in careful balance. My door is open to my father, who learned the truth and chose it the moment he had it. It is open to Nana Ruth, to Maddie, to the aunts who apologized and meant it. It is open, cautiously, to Cole, who has called twice now, awkward and sincere, trying to figure out who he is without our mother arranging the furniture of his life. It is not open to my mother, not out of revenge, out of arithmetic. She has never once, not at the party, not since, said the words, "I am sorry, I was wrong," without folding an excuse inside them. Until she can, I am not available to be made small again. That is the whole boundary. I am not punishing her. I am just no longer volunteering to be the daughter in her story instead of the woman in mine. There is a difference, and it took me 33 years and 40 sealed envelopes to learn it. If there is one thing I want you to take from a yard full of string lights and a cake nobody ate, it is this: you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep warm the people who only ever wanted you smaller. That is how a stack of sealed invitations ended a 40-year lie. The empty chairs, the stamps in the trunk, 1 star, and it was never me. If someone in your life keeps you small by telling your story in rooms you are not in, stop mailing them your worth and let the truth stand in the open where it cannot be twisted. Share this with the person who needs to hear it. Tell me your story in the comments and subscribe.